It was a rainy evening, and the city's favorite restaurant was filled with chatter, laughter, and the clinking of silverware. People came in with their umbrellas dripping, jackets soaked, and smiles wide, ready for a warm meal. Amid the crowd stood an elderly woman, her clothes damp and worn, clutching a small bag close to her chest. She looked around, searching for a place to sit. But as she approached one table after another, people turned away, pretending not to notice her. Some whispered, some frowned, but no one moved a chair. Her tired eyes told stories of loneliness that no one cared to hear. The waitress hesitated to approach her, unsure of what to do. The woman smiled faintly, hoping for kindness, but the waitress simply said, "I'm sorry, ma'am, we're full." The old lady nodded, as if she had heard those same words countless times before. She stepped aside, standing quietly near the window, her reflection blurred by raindrops. Her hands trembled slightly as she wiped her glasses, trying to hide the sadness on her face. The restaurant, warm and bright, suddenly felt colder to anyone who noticed her, though few did. At a corner table sat a young man named Daniel, a teacher who had come after a long day at work. He noticed the old woman right away. While everyone else was focused on their meals and conversations, he couldn't take his eyes off her. Something about her reminded him of his late grandmother, who used to say, "You can tell a lot about people by how they treat someone who can do nothing for them." He watched as the woman tried once again to find a seat, only to be ignored again. His heart sank. Daniel took a deep breath, stood up, and walked toward her. The sound of his chair scraping the floor turned a few heads. The old woman looked up, startled, her eyes meeting his. For a brief moment, time seemed to pause. Then, with a gentle smile, he pulled a chair from his table and said softly, "Ma'am, please, have a seat." The restaurant went quiet for a second, surprised faces all around. No one had expected anyone to act differently. She hesitated, unsure if he really meant it, but his kind eyes gave her the answer she needed. As she sat down, Daniel called the waitress and asked, "Could you please bring another plate?" The waitress looked confused, then nodded awkwardly. The old woman looked down, whispering, "You don't have to do this, son." Daniel smiled warmly and replied, "I know. That's why I want to." Her lips trembled as tears welled in her eyes, but she quickly wiped them away. For the first time that evening, she wasn't invisible. Around them, people shifted uncomfortably, realizing how heartless they had just been. The food arrived, steaming soup, warm bread, and a simple meal that smelled heavenly to her. She looked at the plate as if it were a feast. Her hands shook as she picked up the spoon, whispering a silent prayer before taking a bite. Daniel watched quietly, not wanting to make her feel uneasy. After a few moments, she began to talk softly, telling him that her name was Mary. She used to be a teacher too, years ago, before life took everything away, her husband, her home, and eventually, her family. Daniel listened intently as she spoke, her voice fragile but sincere. She told him about her days in the small school where she taught children to read, her dreams of writing a book, and the husband she lost in an accident. Every word painted a picture of resilience and heartbreak. The people who had ignored her moments ago now glanced over from their tables, some whispering, others watching silently. The warmth that had left the restaurant seemed to return slowly, melting the coldness that had filled the room. When she finished, Daniel said softly, "You must have changed many lives." She smiled, faintly, "Maybe once. But now, people only see my wrinkles and rags." Daniel shook his head. "No, I see someone strong, someone who never gave up." His words made her eyes glisten again. For years, no one had spoken to her with that kind of respect. That single sentence restored something she thought she had lost, her dignity. Around them, the hum of the restaurant softened. Even the waitress seemed moved, offering a genuine smile as she refilled their glasses. The meal continued with laughter and gentle conversation. Mary told stories about her students, the silly mistakes they made, and the joy of watching them learn. Daniel laughed with her, imagining her in a classroom full of bright young faces. For a while, the world outside, the rain, the loneliness, the pain, seemed far away. It was just two souls sharing food, warmth, and humanity. And the people who had turned her away earlier couldn't help but watch with quiet shame. After finishing, Daniel asked if she wanted dessert. She laughed softly and said, "It's been years since I had one." He ordered a slice of apple pie, and when it arrived, she looked at it like it was gold. "My husband used to make this for me," she whispered. She took a small bite, and a tear rolled down her cheek. Daniel smiled gently. "He'd be happy you're smiling again." For a brief moment, the pain of the past faded into sweetness, one bite, one memory at a time. When the bill arrived, Daniel paid quietly. But as he was about to leave, the manager approached and said, "Sir, your meal is on the house." Daniel looked surprised. The manager added softly, "Thank you for reminding us what kindness looks like." The restaurant, once filled with indifference, now glowed with a quiet sense of gratitude. People nodded at Daniel and Mary as they stood up to leave. Some even clapped softly, not out of pity, but out of respect. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets glistening under the streetlights. Daniel offered his umbrella, but Mary refused with a smile. "You've already given me more than enough," she said. "You reminded me that goodness still exists." Daniel replied, "And you reminded me that small actions can change everything." They stood there for a moment, two strangers connected by compassion. Then, with a grateful smile, she turned and walked away into the night. As Daniel watched her disappear around the corner, he felt something shift inside him. That simple act, pulling out a chair, had changed more than her evening. It had changed his heart. He realized that the world didn't need grand gestures to be better, it just needed people willing to care. He looked back at the restaurant window, where the reflection of his grandmother's quote seemed to echo, "Kindness costs nothing, but its value is beyond measure." Days later, Daniel returned to the same restaurant. The waitress greeted him with a smile, saying, "You'll be glad to know we now keep a chair open, for anyone who needs it." He smiled, touched by the gesture. The empty chair by the window stood as a quiet reminder of that rainy night, a symbol of humanity, respect, and the power of a single kind act to inspire many. And somewhere in the city, Mary sat on a park bench, holding a warm cup of coffee that the restaurant manager had sent her that morning. She smiled as she watched the children play, her heart lighter than it had been in years. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel invisible. She whispered softly to herself, "There are still good people in this world." And indeed, there were, it only took one to remind everyone else. Subscribe to this channel and like it.